The VRA thing? That's semi-annual.
That's right.
Sorry, I think you're. Yeah, it's us and Bob. That's what we needed four. That's why I said, please, please, four.
They get free use of it. That's a great question.
I think Bob's taking his children back to school. There was a little discussion about that. Finally. And Ridgeway, I haven't heard from. I haven't heard from him at all. Like Larry was saying, he's sort of off the grid right now. Forever.
We got it, decided something.
He's he sent some onions over to me for his, he sent me some big bag of onions for his garden. And Jim, my husband, saw him and said that he was not completely doing well. He seems rather disconnected.
What I love.
And I feel bad for him, you know.
Oh, no, they were there, well, about 2 weeks ago. And then a month, 2 months before that. And then.
You ready?
He's not being in his 90s, doesn't he, Bill? Yeah.
Oh, really?
Because his kids are.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lisa, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Foskey, Vice Mayor Bloxham,
Present.
Councilmember Marino. Here. Councilmember Krause.
Present.
Councilmember Berger. Councilmember Oswald. Here. Councilmember Sharika Riley. A majority of members are present. We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. And let me just say to council members, evidently we have a little bit of a finicky audio system. So when any of us are speaking, we need to remove our mask and make sure we speak into the microphone. That said, the first item on the agenda is consideration of the approval of the minutes from our July 27th meeting. We have comments, changes. Lisa, Mathis correctly pointed out that in my comments last month towards the end of the minutes, it states in the minutes that the Samuel D. Outlaw group rents that property from the town, and that is in fact not correct. They're given free use of that, so if we can just make that one minor change, please.
On page 6 of the minute.
Also, Mr. Vice Mayor, this is the opportunity that you have to amend the agenda if you choose for the addition of the DMO. There's a motion at the very top.
I don't see that about Rick. I see that there's an onset of the temp. But it is.
Go
You're gonna
down
have
to
to help
where it
me with
says
that, Mr. Spot.
501c3 at the beginning of the paragraph.
Right at the top, that says agenda item 2A. On your, now there's a packet right in front of you that the top item
Okay.
says agenda item 2A. Stapled together.
I've got too many staples.
Got it?
I still don't have it. If you don't mind. I'm trying to be both digital and paper. Aha. Thank you. And it was in front of me. So, agenda item 2A requires a motion, and I think I should not make the motion where I am acting as vice mayor. So, Ms. Oswald, would you be kind enough, if you agree with that, to make that motion? Hate to put you on the spot.
It's no problem. Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that we amend the agenda for this evening's meeting to add item 4.d, resolution pertaining to petition the Virginia Tourism Commission to recognize Onancock as a destination marketing organization.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Public comment? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not without a little difficulty, but we got it done, Mr. Town Manager. The first item of public business tonight is a planning commission public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, you have to approve the minutes with the,
Oh, did we not?
you did that.
Thank you for keeping me straight. Okay, back to the minutes. We had a one correction. Any other additions, corrections? If not,
I move we accept the minutes as corrected.
I second.
thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I was just rushing to get to planning commission, so now we do have a public hearing tonight. So I open the joint public hearing regarding the application to the town to rezone 18 Market Street from B1 Business Downtown to R1 Residential. And with that, I'll turn it over to Judith Greer, the chairman of the planning commission.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to please ask that you take attendance.
Okay. Commissioner Bagwell,
Here.
Commissioner Bloxham,
Here,
Commissioner Dunton, Commissioner Frey.
Here.
Commissioner Greer,
Here.
Commissioner Schreiber. Majority of members are present. We have a quorum, ma'am.
Thank you. Planning Commission, call to order. I call the August 24th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting to order at 7:05 p.m. We have an application to rezone Fletcher and Janet Foskey, 16 Market Street, request for rezoning application. Currently, 18 Market Street is zoned Business Downtown B1. Mr. and Mrs. Foskey are requesting the property be rezoned as residential R1A. Can I have a motion to entertain the application made to rezone 18 Market Street from B1 Business Downtown to R1A Residential?
I'll make one.
Okay. Is there a discussion?
No objection to it. I have no objection to the rezoning. I'll go for it. Hopefully it'll lead to one less empty building.
Wonderful. I have no objection to it.
It's a house already.
It is a house, yes.
Doesn't make sense not to.
Okay. I move that we recommend to town council that the town rezone 18 Market Street from B1 downtown business to R1A residential. Do I have a motion?
I'll so move.
Okay. Is there a second?
Also.
Wonderful. Any other discussion? No? Okay. Then
You have to call the vote, ma'am.
we are ready for a vote.
Yep.
All in favor of application?
aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion is approved. Can I motion to adjourn the planning commission meeting? Okay, second. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will call the town council meeting back to order. We have a recommendation from the planning commission to accept the rezoning request of the Foskys on 18 Market Street, coming with unanimous consent from the planning commission. Any discussion among council?
Point of order,
Yes, ma'am.
because we are three, as the council members and you as the vice mayor, or how does that work in terms of a vote?
I can vote because I'm not the duly elected mayor, so I count towards the quorum if I'm sitting in with Fletcher. Great question, and I clarified that before the meeting.
You did?
Well, not with you, I clarified it with the powers that be, am I right?
Pardon moi?
Any other discussion among council? Not, I do believe we need a motion from council to accept the planning commission recommendation.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that the town of Hancock approve the recommendation made by Planning Commission on August 24th, 2020, to rezone the property located at 18 Market Street from downtown business B1 to residential R1.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Scratch that off the list. The next item of public business is the resolution to transfer East Street to VDOT, and I believe Mr. Spot will handle that.
Yes. As you see, there is a resolution in the packet on page 4B. So we do need to have a motion, and I've included some suggested language for that motion. There is a resolution that's provided by VDOT. This is the language that they need to have in the resolution. They've also provided what they refer to as a Form AM 4.3 that shows the exact termini from the street name. It's also, you should know that it's been recorded with the district court. So as of today, all we need is your vote on the resolution to transfer East Street to the VDOT secondary road system. Now, to be clear, this does not change ownership of the street. All it does is allow for VDOT. What we're doing is we're saying there are no encumbrances on the rights of way that will allow them to permanently maintain East Street. We retain ownership of that property. Does that make sense?
How do we do that? I mean, on the other streets that we've turned over to VDOT?
There have been no
We don't-
other street turned over in the recent past, and they've been very, very clear that the resolutions that the council votes on ensures that there are no encumbrances on the rights of way, which basically means there's no other utility that's going to preclude them from maintaining the property in perpetuity.
So we get the road, we own the road and they maintain it.
Yes.
I like it.
I do too.
Yeah.
And procedurally, we need
Procedurally, there's a motion, and the resolution needs to be read in its entirety, which is only gratefully 3 paragraphs long.
Okay. Well, I would be happy to read it. I'll leave the motion to another member of council. Town addition to secondary route mileage limited and does not meet VDOT standards, but RA/RE must approve quality of road for acceptance. Resolution, whereas the town of Hancock has authority pursuant to code section 33.2-339, the Code of Virginia, to request the addition of mileage to the secondary system of state highways, as long as all proposed mileage conforms to specific Virginia Department of Transportation requirements, addressing widths of right-of-way and not exceeding a 1/4 mile limitation maximum allowable new secondary system mileage per VDOT fiscal year. Now therefore be it resolved, the town council of the town of Hancock requests the Virginia Department of Transportation to add the segments described on the attached Form AM-4.3 to the secondary system of state highways. Be it further resolved, the town council of the town of Hancock does guarantee to the Commonwealth of Virginia clear and unrestricted right-of-way of 40 feet as required by VDOT secondary highway system policy, and including all necessary easements for cuts, fills, and drainage structures for the segments requested to be added.
What shall I read the motion?
Please, ma'am.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that we adopt the resolution as follows to transfer East Street in Hancock to the secondary route for VDOT. Now, you said in its entirety, is there more to this now?
No, he's read the entire
Okay, because
resolution.
the other one had it at the bottom as well, and I didn't know whether you wanted that read. Okay.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One down, many to go. Thank you, Matt. That brings us to the last item of public business on the agenda, the Town of Hancock Infectious Disease Preparedness and Response Plan. Mr. Spuck, that's got your name beside it as well.
It does. As I'm sure you're aware, the governor has put out an emergency temporary standard for all employers in the state of Virginia. As part of that standard, we needed to do an evaluation of all of our staff to find out what level of possible exposure to COVID each staff member may be exposed. And because we have a police department, that rings the bell to say that we have employees with high exposure possibility. Because we have employees with high exposure possibilities, we're required to have an infectious disease preparedness and response plan. I prepared that plan and had Personnel Committee of Council review it with me. They've read it, they've moved forward with it, so that tonight it does need to be adopted by the 25th of this month, and by the 25th of next month, all of the training, HR standards, form requirements, payroll mandates, all of those have to be implemented by the town. You should know that there is a sunset clause on the ETS, which says that the governor may suspend, drop, or extend this ETS at his or her discretion. So the motion that's in front of you says that this infectious disease preparedness and response plan will stay in effect until such time as the governor either pulls it or extends it, but it has the same life as the ETS. This is not a permanent policy on behalf of the town. Yes,
Only one question, maybe.
that's pretty good because this is 16 pages.
I don't know, it's just that I'm in the job tasks and work areas and exposure risk area. I don't know whether that foreseen in the corner is the page, but recent studies have been made that show public works are an area that can predict hotspots. My question is, how do you think that a person who's working in that area exposure is medium and not higher?
Because this is for employee protection, not contact with the public. So what this says is because they have exposure to one another, they share tools, they share vehicles, that's what defines them as medium. But because we have a police department, all employees will be following this infectious disease plan, not only the police department. So because we have a police department, we're required to have the plan. Once we have the plan, all employees are required to participate in the policy.
Okay,
So
it's
even
not
though
the
they
job
might be
exposure.
labeled as medium, they're going to be participating in the policy as if they were high.
Okay.
Page 8, I think it is, no, 6. In the event of an outbreak, we will define as an order from the governor altering our required response or 3 or more town of Hancock employee contract COVID-19 simultaneously, then we go to a contingency plan. Is that 3 or more based upon our population?
No, that's 3 or more depending on the Virginia Department of Health says that if you have 3 or more simultaneous employees who simultaneously contract COVID, then that's when you need to drop into your contingency plan.
That seems like a good many for the size of our town, 3 or more,
It would be.
yes.
Matt, did you write this on your own, or is this a template that we were able to get from another locality?
I appreciate your vote of confidence with that. Our insurance company put together a template along with the Virginia Occupational Safety and Health. So VRSA and Bosch both combined to write this template, so I filled in our blanks.
And will we be conducting temperature checks once this goes into place? Are we going to purchase the touchless thermometers?
Yes, that's going to come up later in the agenda with what we might be doing with some of the COVID money, but yes, we are going to have to participate in pre-shift checks. We're going to have end of shift sanitizing, and there's going to be protocols between shifts for shared vehicles, for shared toys, tools, all of that. So there is quite a lot of work that has to take place once you vote for this. And honestly, there's no choice in your voting for this.
Understood.
Okay.
My last question was if this policy requires masks in our public areas, town offices, are we enforcing that as we sit here now?
Well, enforcing is a complicated word. We require masks to enter. If they come in without the masks, we're asking them to put masks on, but we're not going to physically remove anybody, and we're not going to involve the police department. So we're honestly hoping that our residents are going to comply with those requirements. If they don't, and we don't feel safe as employees, we will drop to a contingency plan where we'll restrict access.
And the employees have the authority to speak out and say if they're not comfortable?
Absolutely, and that's probably the key behind any of this is that they would have, every employee has to be trained, and it is a dense training, I will tell you. Once they're trained, they would come to me or the mayor as the secondary health officer that is named by the infectious plan.
Mhm.
So anyone can have a voice in that. It's the most important thing that this policy puts out is the safety and comfort of our employees. It does that above all else. So that's what this focus is, not contact with the customers, contact with the public. This is about our employee safety.
Thank you.
I just have one question. Do any of the other town businesses have this same mandate? And if they do, are we involved in sharing or working with them or combining training or any resources being sort of co-used?
Yeah, the ETS is required of all employers. Now, there are some waivers, and that I'm not going to get into counseling other local businesses on whether they would, apply for or receive that waiver. If anyone did want to benchmark from our plan, I would happily provide it for them because this is a long piece of work that took quite a lot of effort on our part and the personnel committee. So I'm glad to share it. Just
Okay, I have on page 12, it says, any individual entering town of Adancock may have their temperature checked and or a questionnaire completed prior to entry.
May.
Town of Adancock, town hall. Yeah, I think we need to add that. You're not gonna stop
Well,
out
it's
on the
any-
street.
Well, no, but this is for employees, for its employee workspace. So you have to be familiar with or comfortable with the fact that our police department and our DPW don't necessarily work in office space. So if they feel uncomfortable, they have the right to ask that the people they're in contact with answer a questionnaire or, I don't see that happening. I think you're right for town buildings.
Town of Adancock offices. Or
I'm happy to revise this in any way that you're comfortable, but generally speaking, the offices for some of our people aren't inside a building.
I see.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
The last one. So I understand that we are now the 80 hours under that, right? If a person is quarantining?
Yeah, the FFCRA, which is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act,
Okay.
requires that the town provide at its own expense up to 80 hours of what we're calling COVID time.
Right.
And what that means is if I've been exposed to, or I believe I have symptoms of, the first 80 hours of that person's time is paid for by the town. Now, there are return to work requirements that are pretty well detailed inside this plan. Outside of that 80 hours, that's when the person would need to start dipping into his or her own bank, whether it's sick time or vacation or whatnot. So the first 80 hours is on us. After that, then we've got our normal sick leave policy.
Do we need to put that into the personnel policy?
No, because this is a temporary
Oh, I see.
policy. So what this does is it lets people know in their training that they'll get over the next month, lets them know that.
Very good.
Okay.
Other questions? This is an action item requiring council approval, so if there are no further questions, may we have a motion?
I'll do it. Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that we adopt the Onancock Infectious Disease Plan as presented and included in the materials for the town council meeting of August 24th, 2020, and keep the practices contained in it in place until such time as Virginia's emergency temporary standard is lifted or expires.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you both. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of adopting the plan, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Moving to council discussion, the first item for discussion is.
You still have to go to the new item on the agenda, which is item 4D, for the resolution to become a DMO for the VPC. And any other acronyms or acronyms you can throw that in.
Okay.
So there's a suggested motion in the packet for item 4D.
There is a motion.
For the declaration of state of emergency.
No, this is item 4D, which is the adoption of the.
Can you give us 1 second to read this?
Gladly.
Yeah.
I don't have 4D, so I'm at a bit of a loss.
It's in the packet that was stapled together with those.
I think
Remember the
mine
one
got
that
away
started
from me.
with, the one that started with 2A? Should be the last 2 pages. in that staple file.
I think mine got away from me now. Thank you.
Okay.
Davis is sharing.
How unusual.
I'll use my hand sanitizer before I hand it out.
Done.
Is there any discussion around this?
No, I think I can probably, the Main Street came forward with a request that the town become a designated marketing organization. The benefit to this is that we would receive marketing invitations, grant applications that are only available to DMOs from the Virginia Tourism Commission. So all this does is that your resolution allows us to petition to become a DMO, which would allow for us to receive invitations. There is no action required, there's no requirement, but it allows us to receive the invitation to participate. We might not receive those otherwise. So Main Street, I think after some time passes and their resources build, may have the resources to become the DMO, but for right now, we don't want to miss any opportunities that could be presented to us. So in the meantime, this is going to say that the town would be the DMO and I, as town manager, would be the chief liaison. We can have affiliate DMOs down the road, and that's where Main Street might come in and other organizations. So this is to allow us to receive those marketing and grant invitations, but doesn't require any action on our part or commitment.
So just to accept the resolution.
Correct.
Want it read into the minutes?
I mean, it's all right.
Excuse me?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Resolution. Virginia Destination Marketing Organization. Whereas the town of Onancock wishes to increase tourism opportunities, and whereas the state of Virginia's Tourism Corporation coordinates marketing activities solely with destination marketing organizations, DMO, within the state to market the Commonwealth as a premier travel destination. And whereas the advantage of being a destination marketing organization within the Commonwealth of Virginia would allow for partner opportunities and grant applications. And whereas increasing tourism to the town of Onancock would serve to increase local business that may result in increased tax revenue to the town and surrounding communities. And now, therefore, let it be resolved by the Town of Onancock Town Council this 24th day of August 2020, the Town of Onancock will petition Virginia Tourism Corporation, VTC, to recognize the Town of Onancock as a destination marketing organization, DMO. Be it still further resolved that the town manager or his or her designee is hereby authorized and directed to act as chief liaison for the DMO. The foregoing resolution was adopted by the Town Council of Onancock at its regular meeting held on August 24th, 2020 in Onancock, Virginia.
Thank you. Further discussion? I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution, please.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that we adopt the resolution as follows or as read.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. Further discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution carries. Now, council discussion items. The first item on the agenda for discussion is consideration of an Hancock's ability to independently declare a state of emergency. I think, Matt, you have some background here.
I do. With the pandemic, one of the things that we saw was that one of our other local communities declared a state of emergency, which gave them the ability to adjust some of the things that they sold, some of the ways that they did business, but also by declaring a state of emergency locally, it qualified them for FEMA funding. That FEMA funding added benefit to the town so that they could pay for some of the additional burden and some of the additional costs that was associated with that state of emergency. We currently don't have the ability to declare a state of emergency. So that's what this discussion item is. So one, to be clear, anything in the discussion section, there is no motion, there is no vote. If you do choose to move forward with this, then next month or an appropriate meeting, we'll make a motion to adopt this. But for now, this is just simply an item for your discussion and consideration.
Council comments?
It's a very interesting document. When you read it, there's a lot in it. And what jumped out at me was any member of the governing body, I assume that's the council, may declare the existence of a local emergency. So like, could I on my own just say any member as any member?
It's in absent of the full town council, but
at that point, any person on council.
after the entire town council was unable to fulfill its obligation to. I mean, that's.
And it's the mayor, there's an order. There's an order first. It goes to you and then it goes to the mayor and then if no one's available and then we step up.
Correct.
Okay.
Is that something that you'd like clarified?
Yeah, because I'm just, and then we have to have a special meeting within 45 days for declaration. Well, we meet every month, so we definitely meet that.
But don't you think
It
that
depends on the
45 days?
emergency, quite frankly.
That's true, I never thought of that.
I mean, the 45 days bothered me in that it doesn't seem that time is of the essence in a situation.
It's a continuation of the state of emergency. So what it says is the state of emergency needs to be declared and it needs to be ended. And you've got 45 days to do that. If you choose to extend it, that's one of the things that we saw at the local, one of the local issues with that 45 days.
But it says it is declaring, the governing body declares the existence of the local emergency. And then it confirms it at the next regular scheduled meeting. So within 45 days, it just seems to me that it is or it isn't.
Right, but then it says the
Yeah.
town council, when in its judgment, all emergency actions have been taken, shall first, the town council, when its judgment, blah, 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 shall take the appropriate action to end the declared emergency. So you have to open it and you have to close it. We can't be under a perpetual state of emergency.
And is this contingent upon the governor declaring a state of
No.
emergency? We can do this totally independent.
Correct. Now, I'm not sure why you ever would, but if there were an
Well, there could be
emergency
a local-
locally,
Yes.
and one of the things that as we write our emergency response plan, there are basically two types of emergency. One is man-made and the other is, sort of a force majeure. So we're developing emergency response plan for each type. So if it were what I'll say, a man-made emergency that was local, the state very well might not declare a state of emergency. We might need to have our emergency response plan activated.
Several years ago, we had someone from the county come in and tell us about emergency routes and all of that in case of emergency. And the county could declare a state of emergency that would cover the entire county.
It still absolutely does. This does not trump the county's response plan. They are absolutely required or are providing for our safety in the state of emergency. They have all the services for hurricane evacuation. They have all the services for sheltering. They have, that is their job. So we will not be circumventing any of the county's authority or.
Because it says in D, no interjurisdictional agency or official may declare a local emergency. So he can't say
On our
just
behalf.
Onancock, he can't say just Onancock, but he can say the entire county, is that correct?
It can't be on our behalf.
Can't be on
On
our
our
behalf.
behalf. So somebody can't declare an emergency on our behalf.
Okay, so it's just a declaration.
Well, nobody can declare it for us. Does that make sense? So if the county does, we're going to follow the county state of emergency and all of their protocol. They're in charge for that. But if we declare a state of emergency, inside of that, we will have additional preparedness that we need to comply with as well. So at no time do we circumvent the county.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? And you indicated no actions required this month.
No
on
actions
this?
required, but if there is desire on behalf of council to have this added to a future agenda item, you should probably communicate that with the mayor so that when we do the agenda for the next meeting, it can be included if you so choose.
Oh, given that we're missing a couple of members, I think it would be helpful to have this conversation when everybody is present. But there seems to be no downside and, an upside with regard to additional FEMA funding.
I mean, there are legalities that we would have to follow, but in many cases, we would just follow along with the other different states. So we would go with the powers above us.
Is this from the state?
Now,
This
this-
goes to-
Another local municipality shared this with us.
That's kind of. If we're ready to move on from that, the next item for council discussion is consideration of the ability to have council members participate in meetings remotely. Matt, you want to speak to
Sure.
that?
One of the things that we want to make sure of is that council is as busy it is and as strange a time as this is, we want to make sure that we can still conduct town business, even if we all can't sit in the same room. What this would allow us to do, it's not for electronic meetings, what this would allow is someone to participate in the meeting if they were not here. So somebody could call in to the meeting. Now, to be clear, that person may vote, but they are not considered part of the quorum. You have to be physically present in order to achieve a quorum, but they can participate remotely. That remote location needs to be disclosed in the minutes. So, we were participating from XYZ Main Street, but that XYZ Main Street does not need to be publicly available. So it doesn't have to be open to the public, if that makes sense. So I can participate from my living room doesn't become a public meeting space. So I tried to get the code, VML was kind enough to send a sample policy, and that has been reworked a little bit, but its content has been provided for you in this packet. So,
My only real question is how effective would it be in terms of somebody not being able to attend in person for a routine reason? Because code states an emergency or personal matter, which to me may be outside the bounds of business travel, or if I'm on vacation and want to call in from wherever.
Well, there are still guidelines for your attendance at your own meetings. I believe that you're, words in your mouth, but I believe you can only miss a couple of meetings a year. This would allow you to attend up to 2 meetings a year for a personal emergency or a disability or some other reason, but it still only allows up to 2 times that you can attend. So I don't think it's saying that you're going to be able to, take a vacation and call in from.
And council can say that your absence is not acceptable.
Correct. And that is in the policy here that says you can deny that reasoning, and that would just mean that they could not participate.
And therefore any vote would be void.
Right.
So when does that happen, before or after? I mean, at what point do you say, John Smith is in Hawaii and wants to participate in this part of the meeting because?
It's a good clarification. I mean, that might be something that you want to add to your policy.
Yeah.
To
Like
say
we would
that,
have to decide, yes.
48
it's
hours in
valid.
advance of the meeting, you need to be notified, or 24 hours in advance. And at that point, at the beginning of the meeting, the council can vote as to whether or not the remote attendance is
Acceptable.
right.
I was thinking that this was more COVID related. Okay. But you are not considered part of the quorum, so really it's more informational than if you're
But
attending.
you can still vote.
You can still vote,
Yeah.
Right.
but
And
what weight does your vote have if you're not part of the quorum?
well, a meeting doesn't take place without a quorum.
Right.
But you can still vote once there's a quorum. So your vote has the same weight as if you were sitting here.
And you can only do this twice.
Yes, theoretically, you would only allow it twice, but that's obviously up to the mayor and council to police its own policy.
Okay, and illness has to be defined, and I would think in terms of long-term, or because I remember back several years ago, there was someone who was really ill on council and missed meeting after meeting for a very long time, but nothing was ever done about it. And it didn't affect the quorum, it didn't affect the votes in most cases, but it wasn't in the best interest of the town to allow
That
that to
again
go
would
on.
be the mayor and the council's response to that.
Should there not be a policy somewhere in here, in the same kind of area, that would say a long-term illness, the person should either resign or be asked to
I think
resign?
there are attendance requirements in your policy
In the code?
already.
In the code?
You have 2 meetings that you're allowed to miss, but I'm just saying that because there was no declared words to that, there,
Well, when we get to that section in the code review, I would suggest that that'd be a
Okay.
great opportunity to clarify that.
okay.
Because you're saying you think in the code it says absence of 2 meetings. So if we add this into it, then that's 4 meetings a year that a council member can,
Robert.
well, not really miss because it would be a
Look
10.
at you, you got the full book flag and everything. Go, girl.
Did you hear my question?
And I'm not sure whether or not this would be in addition to that same policy
That's what I'm
or,
wondering.
okay, so when we get to the code review for that chapter, we could say, you can choose to add this item to the current code, and then when you get to that current code review, you can elaborate on what your absenteeism expectations are. Does that work for you, or do you want to do something a little bit more immediate?
That would be at discretion of council at that
Correct.
point.
So again, there's no action item as a result of this, but I did hear a couple of questions that might fine tune this before you vote on it.
Yes.
Well, then maybe we can move that portion of the code up if it's not already been moved up, so that we address that, because I think some good points have been made,
Yeah, I
and we
agree.
would need to clarify that, yeah.
Great idea. Other discussion on this item? Okay, we will look for a code review forthcoming soon and reconsider adopting that into town code. The next item for council discussion is the code review of the chapters on animals and fowl and bicycles.
Okay, let me preface your discussion with a little bit of a heads up. What we're trying to do is, if you remember a month ago, we said the process we were going to follow for code review, because it's important that council review and have voice in town code. But in order to do it all at once would be an impossible task. So what we decided to do was we would start with a couple of small codes. We would discuss them as council. Your recommendations or your questions, comments, or whatnot, we would put them back into a document that then would be ready for a public hearing.
So this is the document as it stands? Is that what I'm looking at?
With the red underline parts or the underlined parts, depending on where you got your document. The underlined parts are what staff recommended that you add or remove. So the code was presented to you as is, and then with strike bold or underlined sections for what staff would like to recommend. So the reason we did this was it's going to take, I'm going to say 3 months, and I'll just say 3 periods. The first is for you to look at code as it is today, and then talk about what staff may or may not want to recommend. And that's for your discussion. Then let's just say next month, it would be ready with those comments and feedback. We would have a code ready for public hearing. That public hearing, then you would consider any public comments that were made, and then in the 3rd month, there would be a code that would be ready for your vote. Okay? In the meantime, what's going to happen is every month you're going to have a new code to discuss. So you'll have a discussion, and you'll have a public hearing, and you'll have a vote, but they'll be on 3 different codes. Does that make sense? So we're going to step through all the chapters, sort of one at a time, and you'll discuss it. It'll be ready for a public hearing, and then you'll vote. So there's no rushing. There's no, every voice is going to have a chance to be heard. Does that make sense? That was my intention. Now I throw the ball into your court. and
I didn't have any issues with any of the fowl and the dog parts, but I really have issues with what's going on for the bicycles.
Well,
Because
can we
there's so many.
hold off on bicycles so we get, because I did have some issues. with
Yeah, I'll
this.
get some questions.
Yeah.
So let's go through
Yes.
chapter 3 with the animals first,
Yes.
and then we'll get to chapter 4 with the bicycles.
After you.
Okay. I can't read page numbers, but
Yeah.
it's the one, page 3 of 10 is at the top.
Okay.
And it is impoundment, redemption, and sale of livestock. And it says, after deducting the fine and cost for keeping and arresting. What is the fine? I think we
Well,
need
that's
to
gonna be-
clarify.
Yeah, we're going to be coming forward with sort of a unified fine or fee
Okay.
code, because one of the things that I'm learning as we go through all of these things is that we can only fine up to what the state fines. So because we're a Dillon state, we can't be more punitive or more restrictive than the governing body above us. So state of Virginia says it's an $8 fine. We can't go in and say it's a $5,000 fine. So we have to be limited to that. There's also a reason why some of these, what I would call outdated codes, roaming cattle through the streets, that doesn't seem like something that would happen. But there are certain codes that we're actually required to have, even though they don't seem very likely or very reasonable. As we go through these codes together, we're going to go through and say this section, for example, on roaming cattle, this section is not legally required for us to have. So when we get to the point where we're ready for vote, We might be able to pull things out. We might be able to just show the Virginia code rather than have a full paragraph about roaming cattle, so that we can have town code that's reasonable for us. And we already know that we have to follow Virginia state law. And if we're not being more restrictive or more punitive, or we're not calling out something special for us, we might not need to have it. So it might shorten our code a little bit to be a bit more, I'll say, user-friendly. So that's all going to happen in the 3-month period as we go through this before you vote.
That makes sense.
All right.
All right, my next question is, section 3.4, fowl, horses, et cetera, on lands of another. And we are adding, and I had a very difficult time reading this, but I think it says, it shall be unlawful for any parcel to house more than 4 female chickens of laying age, and they must remain inside a coop at all times. A chicken coop is defined as a structure with 4 walls. Is that next word and a roof? Or is it
A roof, thank you for catching the typo.
It's a
A roof.
not to exceed 25 square feet in size. Okay, two things here. Laying hens does not include peeps, so anybody can have a limitless number of little peeps at their house.
This is your code.
Yeah,
So
okay.
if
We
you
might
want
wanna
unlimited
define it.
peeps, we can limit peeps. But I have to say, the funniest thing is we got an email today talking from somebody who wants to move to the town to find out if having laying hen is legal inside the limit. And she has 6.
That's my next point. Why can't we have 6? Because they're sold by the dozen or half dozen. I don't know that you can even buy 4. So I suggest we go to 6. And then, I know about chickens, used to have them. I'm thinking about having them again. That's why I want to get this clear. I went to Tractor Supply and I looked at their coops. Their medium coop, which is $400, is 6 foot by 7 foot, and that only holds 3 nests. So I think our 25 square feet is not going to fly. If
So to speak.
That's
Yeah.
too small.
No pun intended.
That's too
So,
small.
well, that's
That's a
the
medium.
question,
Make
but
it
then
very small.
later on in the code, it talks about setbacks for the coop
Yeah.
from
Exactly.
the boundaries of the property. So
Yes.
this is where you folks get to do your voodoo, because if we
Yes.
say, I think it's 75 feet is a recommended setback from the property line, that's asking for a decent sized piece of property.
You're never
Yeah.
going to have a chicken coop on one lot in an ant complex.
Exactly.
What is it, 70 by 140?
That's one of
So
my
there's
points.
no way to put a 75 foot, you would have to have at least 2 lots.
And I think dog kennels fall under that
Yes.
same
Yes.
distinction of a 75-foot setback, which, I'm not going to point to anybody who may have a dog kennel less than 75 feet, but I think that could be problematic to some existing residents.
But if dogs are raised within the house, how does, and that's more than 3 adult dogs, how do you deal with that? Because they're not outside in all cases.
How do you enforce it?
And what do what is the rule? Because it says 3 adult dogs, and somebody who raises particular dogs may raise them in their home.
So are you saying that there
So
should
saying
be
that's
an
not a
allowance for
kennel-
more than 3?
It's not a kennel outside, which is the issue because you have barking dogs, right? But if you have a specialty dog and you have 4 or 5 of them in your house,
So enforcement,
What's the
I guess, would be based upon a complaint from
Okay.
a neighbor or another resident.
Well, that would get to the
Situation.
nuisance sections of our code. This isn't discussing it as a nuisance. This is discussing it as
a map. This is what we allow, this is what we do not.
correct.
Okay, the section 3.6 dangerous animals. We've had this problem, so I'd like to look at this a little closer. It says if the owner upon notice that the animal is at large, who notifies them? The police, another citizen? Who does the notice come from? We need to decide.
Yeah, because you can't call the police and say, because you don't often get an answer. You know, you can't, and the state police is the only way to go to force a dog at large.
And then there's a sworn complaint. And they will summon the owner or person. And then this is pretty harsh. That animal's gonna be killed.
Oh,
But on the other hand, we had this happening on our street, and you don't want dogs roaming the neighborhood. They kill chickens. So, you don't want that happens. But surely there's some steps between a citizen complaining or a police officer complaining about a loose dog that's dangerous and the dog being killed. There must be we'd have to work through that.
because it's not necessarily dangerous, he's just loose.
No,
Well,
he
it's
has to be
dangerous if it
considered
harms another
dangerous.
animal.
Mhm. Or reasonably
Or another
suspected
person.
of being dangerous.
Right. So what would you propose the action be to a dangerous animal loose in town?
Dangerous?
According to this.
Well,
code,
dangerous means that they're
There's
violent
harm to
towards or
somebody.
aggressive toward another animal or human.
Well, first the owner it's suggested that they take custody of the dog. That's the first thing, which that's reasonable. Then if he fails to take into custody forthwith and it's running at large, creates an emergency, and we need to maybe define emergency, the animal shall be killed forthwith by order of the chief of police when deemed necessary for public safety. They will summon before him. the owner
Right,
of
you
the
recognize that this is straight out of Virginia code. This isn't something that Onancock wrote. I mean, the code reference directly below 1989, section 3-6, that
Yes, I
is state code.
Well, on the one hand, I want the code enforced. I don't want dangerous animals on the street. But on the other hand, I want the dog owner to be involved in the process.
If possible. See, that's not always the case, and that's where the officer has to determine, you have to use.
Why would it not be possible?
Because if the owner is at work and the dog is loose and the dog is posing a threat, then that owner you may not be able to get in touch with him in time to make the decision. So therefore, you have to depend on your police or your animal control officer to do the right thing.
I have a question to Matt's comment that this has been pulled directly from the Code of Virginia. And in my, I guess, a question, but in my experience, it's always been the strictest code that you have to adhere to. So we could make this code, there's going to be a question mark at the end of this. We can make this code stricter, but we can't make it more lenient.
Right.
Is that correct?
Well, we
can't make it
can't make it,
stricter.
it's actually the other way around, because we're in Dillon State, we have the rule of the governing body above us dictates what we can do. So if we can't make it more restrictive or more punitive than the state.
Okay. But we can change it to say that,
We can take extra measures.
right, take extra measures,
Right.
but can those measures be less restrictive than the state?
Yes, but at the end, you have to recognize that the state law is going to be the one that gets governed, so.
That was what I was wondering. I have to go back to the chickens. Do we want chickens in Onancock?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
We do want to get as a yes to
You don't want
chickens, as a hard yes to
They
chickens.
become
Okay.
quite popular. I mean, there is people pay thousands of dollars for these chickens. Yeah, I mean, and it's town chickens, they're in towns, and
Okay.
it's really a very popular.
Right, but the question is, what if your neighbor doesn't want your chicken in their yard?
Well, it says they have to be cooped.
So they can never
So they
free
can
range,
free-
they have to be
they
in a
can
coop
free
all the
range.
time?
They can free range on your own property fenced
No.
in.
Fenced in,
That's true, if they're fenced.
fenced.
But I dare say there isn't a 75-foot setback in town, or at least on our
For
side of
chickens or
town,
dogs.
for chickens or dogs, which I think
All right, so then there's section in page 5 of 10, I think it's in 3.8, that talks about the setbacks for
Yeah.
stables, coops, and stalls. Stables, coops, and stalls.
My
So
question was, do we want horses in town? Chickens, I
We already
understand.
have horses.
we have horses
But- And you
in
can
town.
have 3.
And what's the problem?
We have 4 chickens, but you have 3 horses.
Yeah.
6 chickens, careful now.
I don't get that.
I mean, yeah.
Generally speaking, you don't.
But there are space requirements for each horse. I think it said you have to have 200 square feet.
And
Yeah,
again, you're
200
not on
square feet outside the stall with a fenced-in or contained yard per horse.
Go knock on Carp Street.
I know what you're talking
Okay.
We need to think hard about those setbacks, to make sure that we're not
Yeah.
penalizing anybody who's already, you know, in that situation and not
I agree.
bothering anybody else.
Yeah.
Just one little typo with regard to section 3-16, running at large lease required, I think that should be leash, but the more important part there is 316B. I'm just curious, and I think this was a staff recommendation, that it would be unlawful for the owner of any dog to allow, cause, or permit such dog to enter any public building.
That's a strike, not an underline.
Okay,
So it says that it's been altered for staff recommendation. It would say it shall be unlawful for any owner of a dog to allow, cause, or permit such dog to enter any public building, and then there's a period.
which would be a town-owned property, the
Correct.
definition of public building?
Yeah, that's actually an excellent question. Do you want to say town-owned or town? Well, I mean, if you think about it, the school is town-owned, the blacksmith shop is town-owned. How do you want to, it's an interesting
But
question.
DMV is not, they're a public building.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
But
I'm
it's
sorry,
not really.
DMV is not a town-owned structure, but it's a public building.
We need to think about how to define that a little more clearly, but I guess the operative point I wanted to bring up is, you know, the mayor and I have brought our dogs into the town office before, so is that gonna be illegal from this point forward?
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those points of conversation that I think is important,
Yeah.
because I think having a dog inside the office is lovely and makes it more comfortable and homey. But other people who shake their head next to you obviously believe differently. So,
Only because that dog may interact with the public, and the public is not all dog friendly or dog comfortable. So therefore, I would say in a town business office, that it has no place.
Well, I think that's the owner's responsibility to strain their dog. But my question is, what about seeing eye dogs, seizure dogs?
oh, those are always, any,
But it doesn't say that here,
It
so we're not
does.
gonna add those.
yeah.
I was assuming, and you shouldn't assume that
No,
that was
there's
somewhere else
definitely
in the
text in
code.
here that says
Yeah.
service
Yeah.
animals
It's
are,
everywhere.
okay, let me make sure I call it out better.
And can I bring your attention to section 318? The second line where it says the supervisors of the county are hereby designed the animal. I think it's designated.
You're right.
And that would be our officer Kim at this point.
Well, no, the county provides animal control.
Right.
We have an officer who has been stipend for animal support, but currently she does not handle domesticated animals. So if we have a dog or a cat problem, it's animal control. If we have a fox problem, it's our police department can support that. Obviously, we back up from animal control if they're.
And aside on that, how did the fox problem get resolved this weekend?
It didn't.
It didn't? It's still at large?
Didn't hear about
Right in your neighborhood.
It was on
it.
Sturgis.
I did hear something about that.
It was on,
I was on Sturgis.
Meeker. Meeker.
It was on
Yeah.
Sturgis too.
Well, it was on Sturgis, but it was living.
Oh, he lives, okay. So how do we do these kinds of repairs to this? What-
Well, that's where I come in. What I'll do is I'll go through with your comments and I'll update the code based on what I heard tonight, and then we'll have a public hearing on that revised or recommended code. After you get public comment, then you have another chance to opine on it, and then we'll go forward with a vote to do it. So we have a lot of time to make sure that this is fleshed out properly. So don't worry, we're not gonna be pushing this into a vote anytime soon, and I've gotten some other emails when they saw that this was on the agenda that had questions about dogs and dog droppings and other such things. So we're not done, but the conversation has started, okay?
Lisa, I do not have in my code book this section 10-10 page, but I probably don't need it since we're going to change it, and I have the code here, so.
Also, just so you know, Unicode has all of our code from beginning to end with all staff responses. They've committed to having a full code with state references completed and in our hands by the end of September. So we'll have fresh code books for you.
Can we go to bicycles now?
Nay.
This section is so contradictory
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself.
And
So many times, but there's so many places that it's just, and some things are just ridiculous because it says no person shall ride a bicycle and it doesn't say what size.
Well, keep this in mind. The staff recommendation is to redact this entire policy and to put the one paragraph in chapter 13. So
There's-
you're right, the
I
full,
didn't get that,
We
that's
didn't
the
know
deal. Because,
yes, I think on the agenda it says,
yeah, but there's still, again, is this gonna say that there's, no bicycles on the sidewalk?
no, well, it's gonna say, if you read the chapter that's been recommended, it said, no person shall ride or drive a bicycle upon the sidewalks in the following areas: Market Street from College to West and North Street from Market to Crockett.
The people take their kids to the corner bakery and they're riding bicycles. You can't do this.
Well, it's a recommendation. You can choose to do anything you want to with this code, but it's just a recommendation.
Right, I'm just saying that a little facetious, but back in here it says, and all this other stuff that you've eliminated, but there's gotta be either age or size or a bicycle or something in there that allows, because you have kids on training wheels, they're on bicycles, you have kids on, like a 26-inch is a normal adult
At the
bicycle.
very beginning, that one of the things we redacted was the definition of a bicycle.
Yeah,
And,
well-
maybe you're right, is over a certain, over a certain size or less than a certain number of wheels,
Right, a 26-inch.
or more than a certain number of wheels, I guess would be for a tricycle, but.
But a 26-inch wheel is an adult-sized bicycle. I don't know where the intermediate size is.
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought of that. So I'll
That's a
definitely
really
look at,
good point, because like on Market Street, for example, when the rigs pulling with trailers and boats come over that hill, all they see is that water. And if there's a little kid on a bike, they cannot be in the street. They have to be on the sidewalk or they'd be run over
And so,
because they just would. There's no room.
and I also feel that there's a time when an adult is riding with the child, that the adult has to be in control of the situation and on the sidewalk as well. So I'd be very concerned about the safety of a child not unaccompanied, because if they dart out.
it's a great point. I hadn't thought about it. So I'll put some language together that will help that.
Why do we register our bikes with the town?
You don't have to, it's a
I know that,
voluntary
but I'm
thing, but
asking you why.
If it's stolen, if
it's part of the
stolen,
state law, and that's one of those
What does
pieces
it
of.
help to do?
if it's
Well,
stolen, don't join.
Yeah, technically speaking, it puts a description of the bike in town hall, so if that bike is stolen, there's some some record of it, of its description and whatnot. Yeah, this one, actually, the police chief said we cannot redact this part. So the registration, the voluntary registration of bicycles has to be as part of our local code.
Because it's in state code?
And it actually can't be only listed as the code reference. We actually have to delineate.
Gotcha.
The only problem I had here was the last 13-17, riding or driving on sidewalks, which I think we've discussed.
Right.
It defines what areas. Any person found in violation of this section is this state shall be guilty of a class 4 misdemeanor,
Yes.
because that is a $250 fine, just like having drugs or driving drunk, and it stays on your record for life. I'm going to be arrested for riding my bicycle on these streets or the sidewalk and have a misdemeanor on my record for life. And that's a serious offense. If you apply for a job, that's the first question they ask you.
This isn't something the town promulgated.
This is state.
Yes.
But we're basing it on Market Street to College and North to Market for this violation.
So you want me to elaborate on at what point you could be arrested for
I
this?
want to know what point you can be charged with a class 1 misdemeanor.
Or
Yeah,
how,
we
or
would
how you could
advise.
eliminate that, I mean, I ride on my bicycle on the sidewalk sometimes because it's either traffic or because I'm wobbly, you know, and I'm not that proficient as I used to be. So it just makes sense if there's no one there. You'd go down the street on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon in Onekok and you've got the whole road, not just the sidewalk.
Yeah, I think there's gonna have to be some discretion, and the officers, I mean, that's one of the things that we learn is that the police officers almost always have discretion, almost always. So I think that we rely on discretion of our officers. But at the same time, if it's crowded on a Saturday afternoon and you've got a teenager trying to,
Zip through.
zip through between, families walking on the sidewalk, I think there's also going to be somebody coming to my office complaining about that. So, I think that's where the discretion of our police is going to be paramount. And thankfully, we've got a great group of people.
And they just need to, be a little lighten up on that.
Well,
I didn't know it was a misdemeanor.
Has this ever been
Yeah, has
enforced?
this ever been a problem?
no,
Bob, do you know any?
I'm not aware of any, and Matt doesn't believe so. I think it's one of those things to have, just in case you have an egregious violator.
Yes.
Yeah.
A repeat offender.
No, and the fee went to register the vehicle, the bicycle went from 50 cents to $5.
that's right.
What? What?
What is that, 1,000% increase or something?
Well, I think the code was written in 1832.
Before bicycles were invented.
That was back when the wheels in front were 16.
Come on. $5?
Come up with another fee, I don't care.
$1.
$1? There it is. If anybody shows up to register their bikes, we're gonna let them know you personally saved them $4.
Because there's how many people have registered their bikes.
That's why I'm saying this is required code, but not, and this is why I put it out here first, was so that we could start to sort of feel our way through these conversations and feel our way through. I mean, I didn't start with the nuisance and the zoning on purpose, so.
We're gonna have to
What you're
find a
saying
better
is
way
it
to
doesn't
do
get
this.
easier from here.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. These are the softballs,
Yeah,
folks,
okay.
so.
We find a better way to do this. People are gonna be leaving here before we get to the rest of this meeting.
One last question. You're saying that all of the previous policy is gone except for this chapter 13?
316 and 317.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
All right, I'm done.
And if you don't agree, then, we'll back up and add the 7 pages on bicycles. No, you're good?
Very,
And
very
we'll definitely address the issues that you made. They're awfully good ones, so thank you for that.
Public, any comment from those of you who are still standing with us on either
Bless you,
chickens,
man.
horses,
Chickens,
goats,
horses, sheep.
pigs, foxes, or bicycles?
No.
Thank you for your patience. Okay, so I think we've got an action plan to keep this moving forward.
And next month, we'll have 2 additional chapters to discuss and versions of these codes for you to review and put forward for public hearing.
Have you decided what sections are next month?
Gosh, man, I did up until about 20 minutes ago, and now I'm backing away on that. Because one of the things that I'll get into it in the town manager report.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for all your work on this. It's, I think we've all discovered it's a daunting task. But there's only one way to do it. Last item for council discussion, the second round of CARES Act funding or COVID grant, Matt.
Okay. As you know, I'm going to say 2 months ago, I don't remember when exactly it was, there were COVID monies given to the county. The county then distributed monies to the incorporated towns based on our population. A second round has been made available to the county, and they're doing exactly the same thing and distributing that money to the incorporated towns. So we get a second amount, a grant amount of exactly equal amount to the first. Okay. My recommendation for how we distribute these monies is listed on this piece of paper. I put one other piece of information at the bottom, and I want to make sure it was sort of clarified because I don't think I did that very well in your materials. The bottom where it says agenda item 11.4, public hearing, CARES Act, blah, blah, blah. That is what the county presented at the county supervisors meeting for the first tranche. I wanted you to see the words that they used. I wanted to see the reasons that they used and how they appropriated those funds. So that is information only. It came from the county. They did a super job administering it, and they've been, I have to say, we submitted our first reimbursement and they got it back to us so fast. So they were really remarkable to work with, and Lisa did a phenomenal job gathering the information so they didn't have to do any questions asking or anything like that. We sent them all the information they need, and they sent a check like right back to us. So that was really well done. For the second tranche, my recommendation is this. First of all, if you remember the FSCRA requirement that the town pay all employees up to 80 hours full rate for any time away from work because of COVID, my belief is that we should have a reserve set aside for those monies because those would not be part of our normal operating budget. So we could set a reserve aside. This is directly related to COVID, and I believe that's inappropriate. Our, if you're actually curious, our average biweekly payroll approximates $25,000. So this would be what it would cost for every employee to have 2 weeks. The next item is PPE town employee use and distribute to local residents and businesses. This is an amount of money to purchase PPE that we as a town can use, of course, but then we can also distribute to residents and to businesses to help them out because some of these things aren't that easy to come across.
Can I ask, to what degree was it done before of distributing PPE, and what would go to local residents?
I don't believe that it was part of the first appropriation, but we are recommending that this next appropriation, we do buy masks and as many cleaning equipment and other PPE that we can put our hands on. Sometimes it's a little easier for us to get it through our channels than it might be for a local business to put their hand on masks and things like that. Plus, if we can buy them and distribute them with this money, the local business wouldn't have to expend anything out of their own pocket. So we can get a lot of paper masks for $2,000. Yeah, it's just simply there to help. The next item would be in order to comply with our infectious disease plan, we're going to need to do thermometers and safety checks and things like that. So we put $1,300 in there for that, just as an estimate on how many we're going to need and the size of our staff and the number of departments and all that type of thing. The next one is technology to improve remote work options. Those dollars would be for, we'd need a couple more laptops and a couple more licenses and emails to make sure that people who currently work here could work remotely if the need arises. Typically, that need's going to arise under one of two circumstances. If we have to facilitate or activate the contingency plan that's inside the infectious disease plan, or if the governor decides that we're going to be closed one more time. So that's there to make sure that we are ready to continue doing business, if that's the case.
VPN license, what is that?
VPNs is virtual private network, and what that means is it allows for remote access to our data, but it's secured. So it's basically a virtual network as if you were sitting here, but you're not sitting here. So it gives access to the data securely. The next one is building improvements for employee customer safety and distance education learning. It's obviously the biggest number on the paper, so I wanted to take some time to talk about it. We reached out to the local school system to find out if they would be interested in the spaces upstairs here for a remote or distance learning space. They are interested. There's some logistics things that we would need to work out, but you understand that because of the hybrid system, because of the space requirements, spacing is actually a premium for the school system. So if we could find ways to dedicate learning space that would be made available to them and to the community college, they were both interested in continuing the conversation. The conversation can't continue until we have tenable space. And in order to do that, we would need to get electricity upstairs, and we would also need heating and air conditioning. So what that would do is it would prepare the spaces upstairs for current and for long-term use by the town.
Right. Very good.
Okay, so that's what that is. And then, of course, we want to be supportive of our businesses and issue an additional round of business grants. The criterion would be a little bit different this time. What we would ask is that the business actually be open, and that they were open this year and last year. Anybody with a 15% reduction in revenue year over year would qualify, and they would receive. They also have to be current on their bills with us. They have to pay their taxes and all of that kind of good stuff. And then there would be a cap on it. If their reduction in revenue is less than the amount of the grant, then we would cap it at the amount of the reduction, just like we did this past time. So that was the new criterion, and we would allocate or appropriate $30,000 for that. That's where the 106,333 comes from.
And that would, just in round numbers, mean that out of the two tranches, we would have rebated to our businesses virtually 50% of all of the town monies that we received in the two tranches.
We would have given about $100,000 back to the town.
I think a pretty good sum of money.
I think it's an enormous amount of money, yeah, and I think that it's appropriate that we give it back, but it's also appropriate that we make sure the town doesn't have any negative experience as a result of the pandemic.
In a conversation with the mayor the end of last week, he made a suggestion for discussion under the small business grants that maybe we might want to consider reimbursing those businesses for PPE that they purchased during that time frame. Throw it out there because I promised him that we would bring it up. I think if we did that, we could cap it at some figure not to exceed. But
So do you want to say, but I'm making this up, but $5,000 for reimbursement of PPE that you can demonstrate the receipts?
Yeah, nobody kept them.
Well, I would hope our businesses are keeping receipts for tax purposes.
Yeah, as a cost of doing business, but a lot of it was just like, grab what you can and put it out there.
Well, to the extent that people can come up with their documentation and they've spent money that's out of the ordinary, I think that would be a nice gesture as well. Don't know how many would take advantage of it. So
Do you have a
Is it
recommendation
freezing
for a dollar amount?
It's freezing in here,
I
right?
think 5,000. I would say 5,000.
Does this temperature kill COVID?
I think so.
You're welcome to hit the up arrow over there.
Let's go. That's why I wore jeans and. I think
Oh,
5,000 is reasonable, but to the extent that money isn't reimbursed, then we would throw it into the pool for general revenue reduction.
Okay, great. Got it.
So this would be an action item, correct, Mr. Town Manager?
Not yet, no. When we put the full thing together, we've got, if we expend any of these dollars, we're gonna need you to approve the appropriation. So I think anything on this list, and I'm gonna look to my right, but I think anything on this list can wait until after the next meeting.
Are you going to send another letter out to all the businesses?
Absolutely, yes.
I love,
And we're trying to find other ways to communicate with folks, because we found that people didn't open their mail from us, they were afraid, whatever, but, so some people just we had 2 people who called me afterwards and said, I just didn't know. And I said, how could we better have communicated with you? Because we did Facebook, we did email, we did public broadcasts, we did, we did personal letters. I don't know what else we could have reasonably done, but I really want to make sure nobody can come back and say, gosh, I just didn't know. So we're doing all we can to keep that.
I mean, a letter to every business was, that's
I can't open their mail for them.
Right,
I can
that's
surely
not
tell them.
Well, and I think maybe incumbent on us is to talk it up around the town as we visit our business owners to let them know, because I have good friends who missed it just out of their own oversight last time, so.
Yeah. And also, we had to be more clear, I think, that a business in the incorporated limits of Onancock may not apply for the county grant because we kept the money. Right. So that means they do not qualify for the county money. And I had one person come to me and say, gosh, I didn't know that I couldn't apply for the county. So I applied for them, I didn't qualify, and then your window was closed. So.
is that true of all incorporated towns?
Yes.
Those that participated.
Those that
or
participated.
opted out, actually.
I love the idea of this distance learning upstairs. As I shared with you earlier, though, my only concern is that it handicap accessible. So we'd have to work on that somehow to, yeah.
More.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else regarding the COVID funding? Not, that brings us to the point in the agenda where we are open for public comment. Do any of our audience members have anything for the good of the order? You've been a wonderful audience.
You have.
Yes.
Yes, I'm Reverend Heidi Bach. I'm from Market Street United Methodist Church. And a few of the churches were asking, do you know what the plan is for Halloween?
Saw your email just before I came here.
I know, thank you. I was trying to prepare.
I responded to your email to say, to be in touch with the director of the historic Onancock School, Joni Donahoe, because they've had trunk or treat at the school for several years.
From what I understand, I'm new to the community, and when I've chatted with the other pastors, Market Street has been big with trick-or-treaters. Well, Halloween is a great social distancing, mask-wearing opportunity, and families have really lost, and children have lost a lot of opportunity for fun all summer, all school year. And from what I understand, Market Street is a big draw for the outlying community. And we want to try to make it be something as a community draw. And Michelle has a community band, and could we find a way to make it a fun opportunity, because it's a Saturday, and is there trick-or-treat hours? So it's not apart from that. I didn't get to read that email, so I apologize. But is there set times, and it's an actual Saturday?
Isn't Halloween always?
So is there an ordinance already?
I was gonna ask Lisa, what hours have we typically allowed trick or treating
I think it's 5 to 8 is the max, and you have to be under 13 and under.
Yeah.
And the town has not subsidized or run anything formal with regard to Halloween. Our involvement has been on the enforcement of the hours that it was
Well,
allowed.
usually towns set the timing and
Right.
the days, et cetera, and so wanted to work in accordance with that.
But I think it's a grand idea to do something a little bit, I mean, to do some, you're saying with the band and everything, to make it special, because kids have been so deprived on every level and socially. I would just be concerned, this is me, germaphobe, about candy and anything being distributed.
Well, and that's what I'm asking in advance, and Monica from the Presbyterian Church, all the churches, but, you know, I know even the spirit of Halloween, the big Halloween store, Halloween's almost surpassed Christmas nationally in terms of a
Decorating,
holiday.
spending.
and people's involvement. And so that's why I'm trying to look a little bit advanced. I didn't want to wait till September. Wanted us to think a little bit now. What do we want to do for the kids or families? It's a holiday, you gotta wear a mask. Imagine that. And so, you know, we could take the ones and do something fun, but, you know, it would give us as a community an opportunity to think in advance, set the guidelines, take the lead in the community, you know, so we could have the businesses be involved, have, you know, here's what we're doing on the street, or here's only this kind of candy, or whatever we want to say. But I'd rather have us say than be already undone and say, you shouldn't have done that. So I'm trying to ask in advance, as a mother, as a grandmother of 6, as a business, you know, so that we could all work together to put a united front out to say, here is what is, you know, in this very challenge. You know, let's not say what we can't do, let's see what we can do.
I'm just speaking for myself, so everybody chime in, but I think the town would be amenable to whatever you and your group wanted to put together, as long as it adhered to the times that the town has traditionally permitted the trick or treating. I think it would be a great idea to coordinate with Joni Donahoe, since the school has done things in the past and the Historical Society may be interested in.
But I'll certainly go back to your email and see, and make it as the more folks that we can partner in and make it successful, you know, it's an outdoor mask wearing activity. How about that? So,
Sounds good.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
Great,
good idea.
Especially in this time of COVID, I think we could sort of set a new, and didn't the police do something last year and had a phenomenal turnout to, you know, with kids? And I think a lot of people would be uncomfortable at this time opening their door to kids to trick or treat.
well, and that's why I thought that the more we did in town, businesses, churches, and that they feel more comfortable. So whether it involved trunk or treat or not, I'm open to whatever you felt and was looking for your leading and seeing where we thought we should go, and we would move it from there. That's what we weren't, I think we weren't sure either, you know, what our parents, where are they gonna feel? Or kids are gonna be so desperate. You know, I knew that was probably one of my favorite holidays every year, except the year I was a devil and my tail got caught every year in that hand. But, you know, I just was hoping to get, you know, a little direction.
Well, I think the consensus is the town will definitely support it. The way that we have handled other events like the St. Patrick's Day Parade and so forth is it's always a group of private individuals that coordinate the event, and the town assists with regard to police force, et cetera. And I think that's the way that we would handle something like this as well. But I think as long as they adhere to the trick or treating hours of 5 to 8 p.m. so that everybody is, you know.
So at this point, you're not saying Halloween is off. You're saying.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And keep us apprised of what planning you're able to do so that we can make sure we get the word out.
Well, I'll
consistently.
continue to do that.
And hopefully we'll be in a better position in October.
Well, and that's why I didn't want to wait till September. I wanted to give you that earlier thought, and then then as a, you know, as the greater body, we can all, you know, keep in good communication.
Perfect. Great idea, and thanks for
Thank you.
Yes, thank
other public comment. If not, we'll move to committee reports. The HRSD committee has not yet met. I found out last week that the joint hearing on the petition to join HRSD is going to be held the first week of October. So that should give us the impetus we need to move forward with HRSD, fingers crossed. Matt and Fletcher and I have not finalized the other committee membership at this point, so more to follow at the September meeting on that, unless you have anything, Matt, to add.
No, I
I don't know that there is anything to add on that.
don't. No, I got the same news you did about maybe on the docket early October. So I would think right on its heels, assuming for a positive outcome, that we would want our committee to be getting together to start talking about negotiating.
And I think HRSD will want that as well, so more to come. Waterfront Committee, we did meet on August 11th, and I'm not going to preempt Matt's town manager report because he's going to talk about some of this. Would say the two takeaways that don't walk on Matt's report are that we are behind on our transient occupancy to the tune of about 30%, I believe that figure was, which is certainly an effect of COVID. Unfortunately, it seems like the bookings for the remainder of the year are pretty strong relative to last year. So fingers crossed for good weather and good health and maybe make some of that up. We are looking at ways to more fully utilize the Docwa software system that we're using for booking, use that, I think, to a better ability to market and to recapture some of revenue for lost reservations or canceled reservations. So I know that Matt has been working with our harbor master on getting as much out of that system as we can. And the other item that we discussed that we will be coming back to Waterfront Committee and possibly council with is a policy around being more accepting of local people who want to tie up at the wharf in unoccupied spaces. Somebody wants to bring their family over for lunch or dinner to be able to utilize an unused slip for several hours, probably at no charge. An idea, just to get more boats in slips and also to be recognized as that friendly waterfront town that we market ourselves as. And I think Matt and the harbor master are working on something to bring back to us on that. So I will leave waterfront at that. Planning Commission, you guys heard that tonight. Personnel Committee, Catherine, anything additionally?
No, we did meet, but we've covered everything, so.
And our mayor is not here to report on the Strategic Planning Committee, but I would assume that there's been no real action on that front
But a lot of it.
last meeting. Mayor's report, we don't have one, and I don't have anything else to add at this point. So that brings us, Matt, to your report.
Like last time, I'm not going to read it to you. So I've got really one highlight that I wanted to call out was the ramp project. Just so you know where we are, we retain the engineering services. They have gone through and created the first set of drawings that T. Lee and I are looking at to make sure that they conceptually agree. So we have the certain width that we had agreed for larger trailers, and we had agreed that we want to increase the pitch just a little bit so that during low tide we might be able to get a little deeper, and we've got a backstop in there and that type of thing. One of the things that we did learn was that the anchoring system that's used for the bulkhead on the sort of Mallard's parking lot side We are going to use a system called Platypus. Platypus basically allows for a shorter anchoring with the same strength. They've used it up at Quimby with great success. I talked with Stewart at the county. He raved about the process and everything else. It may limit the number of qualified contractors who can bid on it, but at the end of the day, we need to use that because there's a storm drain that runs right down the center of the parking lot. And if we used a traditional anchoring system, we would disrupt that storm drain, which changes this project into a different thing altogether. So by using the Platypus, we don't disrupt that storm drain, and we still get the same performance, and we get the wider ramp. The process at this point is that the bid drawing or the permit drawings start next. So now that we've got the conceptual engineering report, he does a permit set of drawings. Those permit sets of drawing goes to the Corps of Engineers and the MRC, which is the Marine Resource Commission for the state. That's the part that I'm just putting it out there as a blip on your radar screen. That can take time. If because of COVID and other time constraints, that's where I think the risk of the timing of this project comes in. I think everything else seems to be falling in line without any surprises, but if we can't get the permit, we can't start the work. So that's where I think our risk lies. And obviously I have absolutely no news on what this potentially could cost because we haven't gone to bid. So after permit drawings, he goes to bid drawings. We will, in all likelihood, put this to bid while the permit process is going on. The risk behind doing it that way is we will probably pick up some time, but if the permit comes back and says you have to do X, Y, and Z, and that wasn't included in the bid, then we just started with a change order. So we don't think that's going to be the case, and the engineer has done a lot of these before, but he says you just never know what MRC or the Corps of Engineers is going to say or do. So that we just want to be really upfront and clear about that. It's also a possible risk. We obviously don't get committed to anything until we get a bid and sign off on the contract. So if it comes in too high or we're not comfortable, we don't have to do anything. We've already got the bid drawings and the engineer package and the permit drawings done. So we're going to have value added as a result of this. And we're not forced into the project up until a point where council signs off on that. So that's that. I've got a couple other things that I wanted to bring you up to date. One is the Municode. I mentioned that we're going to have that project from Municode finished. And what that's going to allow us to do is go through current code and have meaningful conversations like the one tonight, very specific and very quickly and hopefully very easily. I talked about the process. One of the other things that we've been talking about is you folks. FOIA actually requires that would require your emails if we ever got a FOIA request, they could FOIA your email for any communication on council, but that sort of exposes you privately to public information. So what we want to do is we want to provide you with town email addresses. So it'd be, Bloxham@onancock.com, Oswald@onancock.com, and that way that would be the only FOIA-able, we'll make words up, email address, and you can keep all of your communication private. And so we're going to begin securing that. I already talked with the mayor. He thought it was a good idea. There is a cost associated with it, but I think it's worth it, and it's not exorbitant.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
At our training, at the amount was recommended that this happen.
yeah, so we're moving forward. I also need to put one out there. We're having terrible internet and telephone problems here at Town Hall and the rest of the town. We're resolving it. We're doing the best we know how to do to resolve it, but internet connectivity has been, I'm going to say, spotty at best. And the telephone system that sits on top of our internet provider, which is also spotty. So between spotty A and spotty B, we're having issues. So, we're dropping calls, we're doing that type of thing, but we are doing everything we know how to do to address it. We will solve the problem, but.
Who is our internet provider?
Broadband Authority, and it's not, I love Broadband Authority, so let's be clear about that, but we also were given the connection and the internet, so we don't actually pay for it. But as other users are going up, my opinion is our bandwidth is going down. And as we do more teleworking and cloud-based application, our needs go up. So we're bumping into all kinds of issues like that. We're also performing a telecommunications audit because we write a lot of checks for telephones, cell phones, internet connectivity. So we've got somebody who's actually doing an audit of everything we use to make sure that we're doing it the best, smartest, and most efficient way possible. That's going to be part of this solution. So bear with the telephone thing. It's driving us crazy too, but all right. Tour de Shore is coming. It's September 26th. I asked Robbie to put together a list of the safety mitigation plan that they're taking measures to make sure that everybody's safe and all of that. It's going to look a lot different than it ever has in the past, but the event is taking place, and he wanted to come and share with you what they're doing. But you should know they've so far they've got roughly 235 riders scheduled for the group, and they're doing all of the social distancing and the mask, and they're doing it even out at the rest areas. So they're being very careful, and they've done a lot to make sure that the riders in the community is safe. And I wanted to share with you that. So at your place, I put all the list of things that they're doing, and I think that'll do it for me. Everything else is in writing in your package.
Thank you, Matt. Council comments. To my right, Catherine, anything?
I just want to say thank you to Matt and Lisa for all your hard work and going through all the transitions and the stressful time, and kudos for getting that grant to save the tree. Good job, you guys.
No, it's applying.
Well, applying, yeah.
We haven't gotten Jack yet, so.
Yeah. Well, they're applying for it then. So, yeah.
Mavis?
No comment, thank you.
Ms. Joy?
Yes, I just want to agree with Catherine that we can see a lot of work has been accomplished this month, and that's all.
Yes. I'll bring one thing up that I've mentioned to Matt, but I wanted to bring it up for the rest of the group. In conversations with several of our residents from the Northeast area, I think there is a desire that we do more decorating for Christmas than we have in that area in the past. And for me personally, I would like to see this happen, and I've expressed to the mayor and to Matt that I would be willing to take this on as a private fundraising function. So if everybody is amenable with that, then I'll probably be calling you and asking you for assistance. But I would like to ask the town's assistance in pricing out the exact same decorations that we're using in the Market Street area and the Ames Street area, and look at, maybe over the course of a couple of years, if we first go down Boundary to Carr Street, and then in subsequent years expand beyond that. But I think the first step is getting a price together, and I don't know whether Janet's group has been doing that in the past or the town's been taking it up, but I just bring it up to ask for some assistance in the pricing of that piece. And then, as I said, I'd be willing to go out with my hat in hand and ask for private donations to try to make this happen this year. I think it would be a wonderful thing for those residents who haven't had any decorating from the town in the past, and it would really add to the revitalization that's going on in that section of town.
May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I'm just curious, I think there's a $5,000 Christmas fund or something. Why wouldn't that be it rather than going hand in hand? Because then you guarantee you know what you're doing, and right now you need to buy. So,
Even too late to buy as far as
right,
getting
you
the
gotta
discount.
buy now,
Yeah.
so,
It's half this year, just so it's 2,500 this
okay,
year.
2,500 is a
There's
whole lot
also
more
a
than
committee-
you said before, and it should be town funds, not contributions, not depending on contributions. It should be a plan, give you a budget.
But I will tell you, Mavis, just to that point, that we have, our first year I was on the holiday decorating committee, over half of our funds were from private contributions. So, I mean, it's
I
kind
get
of
that.
historical
I get
how we
that, but
have had
you're at the point where right now is time to do it.
Yeah.
And to say you're going to do something and you get $100, I'll be ticked.
Well, I can
I know.
say
I know,
personally
yeah,
that
yeah, I know
it would
that.
be
I
more
know.
than
I'm
$100.
not, Bob, I'm just being sarcastic.
And I agree with you. I would love for the town to be able to
Right,
cover it
to
under the
say-
budget, but to the extent that that isn't feasible, then I do feel that this is a project that people will open their hearts and their wallets for and would be willing to go out and make that ask. I think it's an easy ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go,
To
go.
throw an operation
Town function.
stick in your mud or mud in your stick, however you want to phrase it, we have to consider the future storage and care of all of these decorations. And right now, we have this stuff everywhere. So as we do, and I think it's a brilliant idea, and I can't wait to participate in it, but I just want to make sure that we're thinking about long-term. We've got to care for these things. We've got to store these things. We've got to replace these things over time. So keep it in mind for budget purposes, even if they come in through private donations, which, you know, the operating budget of the town is going to have to store them, replace them, and care for them.
Maybe this is an opportunity to talk about the outbuildings at HOS and do some work on them or tear down, fix up.
There's a
Utilize.
grant coming that I'm doing a lot of research on that has what it's called strategic acquisition and demolition is one of the components. And I'm looking hard at that for those two buildings. And then also there's some really important portions of that grant for preparing, like our police department doesn't have a generator. Just things like that. So I have that in mind, trust me.
Well, say, I mean, it just tags on to
Yeah.
the storage needs.
No, I know, and when HRSD comes in, and I'm confident that it will, we're gonna lose the plant and all of its outbuildings and all of that. So we're gonna have to be thinking about where all of those things and equipment and tools get stored. So we are thinking that long-term and you know, whether it's that property or one that's out near the water tower.
I have an additional comment. I really appreciate the format of the budget.
Oh, good.
It's very easy to understand.
Yeah.
And I just thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other business for the council? If not, I would graciously accept a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
And a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor? I'm sure no one's opposed. Thank you all for coming.
Yes.
Have a good rest of your week. It is only Monday.